Welcome back guys. In this lecture we are going to discuss about the introduction of Firebase. So first of all, let me tell you what is a Firebase. Firebase is one of the Google product which provides features for building web applications, Android application as well as the iOS applications. So you can use Firebase with any platform, that may be Android, iOS as well as web. So this is the official website of the Firebase. If you want to open Firebase official website, you just need to type Firebase in Google. Open Google and type Firebase. So it will take you to the official homepage of the Firebase. So in the URL also you can able to see firebase.google.com. so it is one of the Google product and Firebase is completely developed by the Google developers only. So there is no trust issues while using the Firebase because it is a Google product. So I'll close this. So now we will discuss the features of the Firebase. As I said, it is one of the Google product which provides the features to the applications, that may be in Android, iOS as well as web. So what type of features does Firebase provides to that platforms? So if you scroll down here, you can able to see all the features. These are all the features of the Firebase to develop the applications. So the first one is Cloud Firestore and the second one is machine learning, cloud functions, authentication, hosting, cloud storage and real-time database. Now we will discuss one by one. So here Cloud Firestore and the real-time database both are related to the database only. So if you want to put your data in any SQL server or MongoDB server, you need to purchase the hosting service that will provide the database. But when it comes to the Firebase, it will provide some free plans. So you need not to put your money to the hosting, you can use it for freely. And these both Cloud Firestore and the real-time database, these are called as the JSON data formats. That means these are not SQL data. These in this Cloud Firestore as well as in real-time database, the data will be stored in the form of documents collections, as like our MongoDB. MongoDB is also one of the non-relational database. That means in every non-relational database, data is stored in the form of documents. That means in JSON format. So Firebase will also provide us the non-relational database. That means JSON. So it will provide the free non-relational database to our hosting. And the second one is machine learning. So already you might be having some knowledge about this machine learning. It is one of the library to build the applications. And this is the cloud functions. And here we do not include the machine learning and the cloud functions while we are developing the applications with React.js. So we will only use cloud storage and Cloud Firestore, cloud storage, real-time database, authentication, hosting. So we can remove these machine learning and cloud functions from our course. So we will be concentrating more on the real-time database and the authentication. So now we will see what is authentication. So authentication is the combination of registration and login. So whenever you want to use any type of authentication in your application, that may be Google authentication, Facebook authentication, Yahoo, Twitter, anything, etc., you need to purchase their API and you need to write the code in their original format. But when it comes to the Firebase, it will provide the same code for all the authentications, that may be Google, Facebook, Twitter, anything, etc. And you can complete the authentication code in the Firebase in almost 10 to 15 lines only. If you want to implement the authentication without Firebase in your application, it may takes around 150 to 200 lines. So this is the one of the best advantage of the Firebase. So you can complete the Google authentication, Gmail authentication, any type of the authentication in just 10 to 15 lines only. And the one of the next feature of the Firebase is hosting. So it is also provide the free hosting. That means if you have any domain, you can host your any web application, that may be React, Angular, anything in the Firebase. So when you want to use Firebase with your React application or any front-end application, you need not to put your amount for costing. That means hosting. So you need not to waste your money. Firebase will provide you the free hosting with limits. So these are the main features of the Firebase: Cloud Firestore, authentication, hosting, cloud storage and real-time database. Here cloud storage is nothing but Firebase provide 5 GB of free storage for every user. That means every user will be a unique Gmail ID. So for one Gmail ID, it will provide the 5 GB of free storage. So you can put your files, images, videos, documents, anything, etc. The limit is up to 5 GB. So if you want to increase that limit, you need to pay some amount to the Firebase admin. And here these features are related to the monitoring. That means whenever you want to use these type of features, it will provide some admin panel to our admins, not admins, user. So after creating the database, you need to check your data daily. So it will provide the complete monitoring and the Crashlytics. And here you can see we'll also get the Google Analytics, predictions, in-app messaging like sending the notifications to the user, etc., cloud messaging and remote configuration. So these are all the features, but when it comes to the real-time implementation, we will use only four features of the Firebase. They are Firestore, Authentication, Cloud Storage, Real-Time Database. If you want to host your application in Firebase, you can host. If you want to host in any another domain, you can also host in the another domain. So there is no such condition that if you use Firebase features, you must host your application in the Firebase only. You can, if you want to host, you can. If you do not want to host in the Firebase, it's up to you. Now let's see the companies and websites which are using the Firebase. So if you scroll down here, you can see here trusted by the largest apps and games. So all these companies are using the Firebase like Gameloft, Trivago, Alibaba. These are the famous companies in the world. All these companies are using Firebase for different purposes. Some of the companies use for authentication, some of the companies use for hosting, and some of the companies used for real-time database or cloud storage, etc. Especially for small developers or students, this Firebase is useful for many situations because every student or every small developer cannot pay the amount for hosting their applications. So if you are in that situation, you can host your applications in the Firebase for freely. But you will get all these features with a limit. So you can host some amount of data, you can use only some amount of storage, and you can perform only some amount of authentication operations, etc. But every Gmail ID will have some amount of free limitations. For practicing purpose and for the small developer, this is more than enough. And it will also provide the complete documentation to the every platform. As I said, Firebase can be used in Android, iOS and web. So if you scroll down here, you can able to see the documentation. Easy to integrate in iOS, Android and the web. So you will get the documentation for anything. Here you can see Swift means iOS, Objective-C is also for iOS, Java and Kotlin are for Android. Here JavaScript is for website, that means web application. C++ and Unity used for developing the games. So we can also use Firebase for developing the games also. Here you can see for different operations we will get the documentation. So you need not to visit all the YouTube things, Stack Overflow, etc. Firebase will provide you the complete documentation if you have any doubts, and it will be very easy to understand compared to the other blogs like Stack Overflow, Medium, etc. So whenever you have any doubts in the Firebase, please first visit the Firebase documentation only. If you are unable to understand the Firebase documentation, then you need to prefer the second option, that means Stack Overflow or Medium, etc. So in the navbar only you can able to see the here docs, that means documentation. If you click on this, you will get the documentation for everything. Get started for Android, that means for Android application. Get started for iOS, this is for documentation with iOS. This is for web. So here we have to use this documentation. If you click on this, you will get all the features documentation with examples. So this is the documentation to implement Firebase in the web application. That web application may be anything. It may be plain JavaScript, it may be React, it may be Angular, or it may be Node.js, anything. So the documentation and the code will be same for every JavaScript library. And it will also provide the documentation for separate features also. You need not to read all the documentation. So if you scroll down here, you can able to see the separate features with the documentation. So as we discussed before, we are having different features in the Firebase like Cloud Firestore, Authentication, Real-Time Database, Firebase Machine Learning, Cloud Storage, etc. So as I said, we will be using mainly two features of the Firebase in our application. They are database and the authentication. Database is used for sending and retrieving the data from React application to the Firebase, and authentication is used for registration and login purpose. And we are going to use the email and password authentication. So if I click on this authentication, it will provide you the documentation which is related to the authentication for JavaScript. Here you can see, you can able to see the authentication platforms, iOS, Android, web. If you click on the web, it will show you the documentation for Firebase authentication. So this is the documentation for Firebase authentication. So you need not to refer all these things because I am going to tell everything you from scratch. So in the next lecture, we are going to see how to connect our Firebase application to the React.js application. Thank you. See you in the next class.